I never imagined my life would unravel in a single afternoon, but that's exactly what happened. And as strange as it sounds, the warning signs had been there for months. Whispers of change, cracks that formed underneath my feet long before the fall. At the time, I didn't understand them. I thought life was just stressful.
People drift.
Jobs exhaust. Relationships stretch thin. But the truth was something much darker, something I could never have predicted, something I didn't know was possible until it was too late. Even now, thinking back on how it all began, there's one moment that plays over in my mind like a stuck record. It was a quiet Sunday morning. My husband, Adrian, was staring at his laptop with this strange tightness around his eyes. He didn't hear me approach until I touched his shoulder. He jumped like I'd stabbed him with an ice pick. "What are you doing?" I asked, half laughing. "Work," he snapped. "Can't I have 5 minutes of peace?" That wasn't like him. Not at all. Adrian had always been gentle, steady, the sort of man who apologized if he stepped on a leaf wrong. We'd been married for 12 years, and I thought I knew every version of him. Happy, tired, frustrated, playful. But this was new. This was cold. I should have asked more questions. I should have pressed him. But I chalked it up to stress at his job. He was a systems analyst for a mid-sized tech firm, the kind of place that expected you to give 110% until your spine snapped. I'd seen him stay up working late, rubbing his temples with that same tightness in his face. So I told myself to be patient, to be supportive, to be understanding. And for a while I tried. But changes kept coming. He stopped kissing me good morning.
Stopped asking about my day.
Stopped laughing with our son, Jonah, who was only 11 and didn't understand why his dad suddenly had no time for him anymore. Meals became silent. Nights became distant. And then, slowly but surely, Adrian started disappearing for work trips that didn't appear on his company calendar. One night, I worked up the courage to ask him outright. "Are you seeing someone else?" He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "No," he said. "And the fact that you'd even ask that says more about you than me." I remember shrinking into myself, feeling ridiculous for even thinking it. The next day, he bought me roses like everything was normal again. But normal didn't last, not for long. 2 months later, my life turned inside out. I was cooking dinner when I heard 2 police cars screech in front of our house. Before I could reach the door, officers were already inside, shouting my name. "Mrs. Collins? You're under arrest." "For what?" I demanded, my hands trembling so violently I almost dropped the pan. "Multiple counts of data theft, cyber intrusion, and financial fraud." "Financial what? Cyber what?" I don't understand," I stammered. They didn't care. They twisted my arms, clicked cold handcuffs around my wrists, and marched me outside like some criminal mastermind. Jonah stood frozen on the porch, tears streaming down his face as they pushed me into the back of the cruiser. And then I saw Adrian, standing on the sidewalk, watching. I searched his face for shock, concern, confusion, anything. But I saw only emptiness. Like this was inevitable. Like he'd expected it. Like it was deserved. I couldn't breathe as the car pulled away from the house we'd built together. The house I had scrubbed and decorated and filled with warmth. The house where I had believed we were happy. At the station, they sat me down in a cold metal chair and slid a thick folder across the table. Printed logs, financial statements, access records, emails, all under my name, all pointing to me stealing confidential company data worth millions, all pointing to me transferring money into offshore accounts. "This isn't mine," I kept saying. "I didn't do this.
I don't know any of these accounts."
"I don't, please, you have to believe me." They didn't. They assumed I was lying. People always assume the spouse did it.
It's easier that way.
And then came the worst part. Adrian gave an official statement confirming that I had been acting suspiciously for months. That he'd seen me hiding financial documents. That he'd caught me deleting emails. All lies. Lies said calmly and convincingly. Lies that painted me as a criminal. I cried the entire night in a holding cell, curled up on a thin blanket, that smelled like bleach and regret. My mind kept replaying Adrian's face. Why would he lie? Why would he do this? What had changed? What had I missed? The next morning, I was released on bail posted by my sister, who looked at me with a mix of fear and confusion. Even she didn't know what to believe. I went home to find my husband gone. His closet empty. His toothbrush missing. A note on the fridge. We're done. Jonah is with my mother. My lawyer will be in touch. My lawyer? His lawyer? For what? I called him 30 times.
He blocked me.
I texted. Nothing. I emailed. Nothing. A week later, his lawyer delivered a divorce petition. And then came the part that broke me. Adrian was suing for full custody of our son, claiming I was dangerous, mentally unstable, and criminally inclined.
Me.
The same woman who had loved him through depression, who had worked 2 jobs when he'd lost one, who had carried and birthed our son, who would have walked through fire for him. I felt like my heart had been ripped out. My attorney, a weary man named Calloway, told me the evidence was bad. Really bad. It looks like your digital fingerprints are everywhere, he said. But something feels off. It's too perfect. Too clean. If you didn't do this, someone set you up and they did it masterfully. Who else could have done it except Adrian?
But why?
Calloway tried to help. He had me gather old texts, emails, anything that showed I wasn't capable of what they accused me of. But the prosecutor didn't care. They had cold data on their side. I had nothing but my voice, and a voice doesn't stand against spreadsheets and code. The night before the preliminary hearing, I sat alone in my dark living room, staring at framed photos of my son. His smile. His innocent eyes. The thought of losing him forever twisted my insides into knots. I didn't do this, I whispered into the quiet. I didn't do any of this. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I couldn't stop shaking. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse feeling like a ghost, every step heavier than the last. Adrian stood across the hall with his lawyer, smiling. Actually smiling. When his eyes met mine, there was no guilt, no shame, only victory. He wanted me gone, ruined, eliminated. But something happened that morning, something he never saw coming. As the judge entered the courtroom, as the attorneys prepared their arguments, as the weight of the world pressed on my shoulders, the double doors swung open. And Jonah walked in. My son. My quiet, thoughtful, gentle boy. And in his small shaking hands he carried something. A USB drive. His voice wavered, but he spoke loudly enough for every soul in that room to hear. Your Honor, I have something you need to see. Something my dad didn't want anyone to know. Adrian's face drained of color. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't know what Jonah had found. I didn't know how long he'd known something was wrong. I didn't know the truth he had uncovered all on his own. But I knew, in that moment, that everything was about to change. For a moment, the entire courtroom forgot how to breathe. Even the judge, a stern man carved from years of routine, leaned forward as if pulled by an invisible thread. My son, my sweet, quiet Jonah, stood in the doorway trembling, his hair messy from rushing, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and that small USB drive clutched in his fist like it was the only thing keeping him standing. Your Honor, he repeated, voice cracking but determined, I need to show you something. It's about my mom. It's important. Adrian shot to his feet, so violently his chair screeched across the floor. Jonah, go home, he barked, pointing toward the door.
Now.
This isn't the place. You don't know what you're doing. But Jonah didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the judge. And the judge, whose patience for parental theatrics was famously thin, held up his hand. Mr. Collins, he said sharply, sit down. Your son is speaking to the court. Adrian swallowed hard. I watched his jaw clench, the muscles in his cheek twitching. He sat, but his eyes were wild, panicked in a way I'd never seen. Not even the day he lost his job years ago, not even when his father died. This was something different. This was fear. Real fear. Jonah walked slowly, each step small, hesitant, but purposeful. He reached the front of the courtroom and looked at me for the first time. His eyes were shiny with tears, but behind them was something else, something fierce.
Determined.
Protective. Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't even know what he was apologizing for yet. The judge gestured gently. Son, what is it you want to show us? Jonah took a breath so deep it shook his shoulders. It's proof, he said. Proof my mom didn't do anything wrong. Adrian slammed his hand onto the table. This is ridiculous. He's a child. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He probably grabbed something he shouldn't have. Your Honor, I must insist this. The judge's voice cracked through the courtroom like thunder. One more outburst, Mr. Collins, and I will hold you in contempt. The prosecutor stood, adjusting her glasses as she eyed Jonah. What kind of proof do you believe you have, Jonah? She asked gently. Jonah swallowed and held out the USB. I copied something from Dad's home office. Something he hid. Adrian lurched forward in his seat. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, trying to keep him from exploding. But the damage was done. Everyone saw the panic burst through the cracks of his carefully crafted confidence. The judge motioned to the bailiff. Take the drive. The bailiff retrieved it from Jonah's trembling hand and brought it to the clerk, who connected it to the courtroom computer. My heartbeat slammed in my chest. Jonah stepped back, his eyes locked on the screen as it flickered to life. A single folder appeared, titled, Client, Meridian Tech, Project Frostfire. My blood ran cold. That was Adrian's company. The same company accusing me of stealing proprietary data worth millions. The prosecutor frowned. Your Honor, this appears to be internal company material. I'm not sure. It's not, Jonah interrupted softly. It's Dad's, he said. Dad made it. Dad stored it. Dad used it. Adrian bolted up again. That's enough. Jonah, you don't understand what you're saying. You're confused. You're trying to protect your mother and saying things you shouldn't. The judge leveled him with a stare so sharp it cut. Mr. Collins.
Sit.
Down. Adrian sank back into his chair, breathing hard, his face flushed crimson. The judge nodded to the clerk. Open the folder. Inside were dozens of files. Documents. Code logs. Password lists. Video thumbnails. Jonah, the judge said slowly. Can you explain what these are? Jonah shifted nervously. I don't know all of it. But I know Dad has been working on something he wasn't supposed to. I know he kept telling Mom she didn't need to know his work stuff, but he was lying. He wasn't working late at his office. He was doing things at home, secret things. The prosecutor folded her arms. And how did you get access to these files? I didn't mean to, Jonah said quickly. I swear. One night, I was looking for my tablet charger in Dad's office. He always yells at me for going in there, so I try not to. But I needed the charger. And when I opened the drawer, the USB was just sitting there. And the folder had my name on it. The judge's eyebrows lifted. Your name? Jonah nodded. I wouldn't have opened it. But I thought maybe Dad left me a video or a game or something. But when I clicked it, it wasn't a video. It was a list. A list of what? My attorney asked quietly. Jonah's lower lip trembled. A list of passwords. A list of accounts. All under Mom's name. The courtroom erupted in whispers. My attorney stood so abruptly his chair almost toppled. What kind of accounts, Jonah? Jonah wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve. Email accounts. Bank accounts. Company accounts. Adrian's voice exploded. Stop lying, he roared. He sprang up again, pointing at Jonah. He's lying. He's just a kid. He doesn't know what he saw. But Jonah didn't flinch. Dad, he whispered. I'm not lying. Enough, the judge thundered. Mr. Collins, one more word, and you will be removed. Adrian's lawyer was frantically whispering to him, trying to calm him down, but Adrian was losing grip by the second. The judge turned back to the clerk. Open a file. The clerk clicked a random document. Lines of code appeared. Formulas. Access logs. Timestamps. My attorney's eyes widened. These are the exact scripts used to breach Meridian Tech's data vault. Your Honor, This is the stolen code. The prosecutor stiffened. That can't be possible. All our evidence pointed to Mrs. Collins' device signature as the origin. My attorney pointed at the screen. Because it was spoofed. These scripts are designed to clone a digital fingerprint. This is proof she was framed. The judge's face darkened. Play the video, he said quietly. The clerk opened the video file. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. And my world stopped. It was footage. Security footage. But not from the company. From our home. The angle was low, from the corner of Adrian's office. I saw him entering with a backpack, closing the door behind him, then opening his laptop and pulling up a sequence of command lines. He wasn't tense or worried. He didn't hesitate. He ran the exact scripts that had stolen millions of dollars worth of data. In the video, he smirked at the screen. Then he said aloud, clear as day.
Sorry, Maya.
But someone has to take the fall. My breath left my body in a single broken sound. Gasps rippled through the courtroom like a shockwave. My attorney froze. The prosecutor turned the color of paper. The judge slammed his gavel. What in God's name? But the video didn't end there. Adrian continued. The company wants a scapegoat, he said. I give them one. She's a soft target. They'll believe anything. And once she's out of the picture, I get full custody. I get everything. No more arguing. No more compromise. No more being dragged down. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he said, to new beginnings. He raised a glass of whiskey and toasted the empty room. The video ended. Silence fell like a hammer. My attorney breathed. Christ. The judge sat back, stunned. The bailiff instinctively moved closer to Adrian's table, sensing danger. Adrian stood frozen, mouth half open, eyes darting wildly between me, the screen, and his son. Your Honor, he began. But the judge cut him off. Mr. Collins, he said in a low, dangerous voice, do not speak. Adrian swallowed hard. It's fake. It has to be fake. Deep fake. Something. My son doesn't understand what he found. Enough, the judge shouted, slamming the gavel so hard the room shook. He turned to Jonah, his expression softening instantly. Son, how long have you had this? Jonah sniffed.
A week.
Dad kept yelling at Mom for things she didn't do. I kept seeing him lock himself in his office. And then he told Grandma that after the divorce, I'd be better off without Mom. He said she wasn't stable. But Mom's the one who tucks me in every night. Mom's the one who makes me breakfast. Mom's the one who helped me with my science fair project. Mom's the one who always shows up. The courtroom blurred through my tears. Jonah's voice dropped to a whisper. I knew he was lying. I just didn't know how bad it was until I saw that video. I didn't tell Mom because I thought it would hurt her. But when I heard Dad say she was going to prison, I had to do something. My heart broke in the most beautiful way possible. The judge nodded, his voice tight. You did the right thing, Jonah. He turned toward Adrian. Bailiff. The bailiff stepped forward. Adrian's eyes widened. No, wait. This is all misunderstood. I can explain. Mr. Collins, the judge said slowly, you are under arrest for fraud, fabrication of evidence, perjury, obstruction of justice, and child endangerment. The bailiff grabbed Adrian by the wrists. Turn around. Adrian tried to yank away.
No.
No, Jonah, help me. Maya, you know I wouldn't. But his voice twisted into something desperate.
Ugly.
Jonah stepped back, clutching his backpack to his chest, tears flowing. And as the bailiff handcuffed Adrian, dragging him from the courtroom, Adrian screamed, Maya, you'll regret this. You'll see. I did everything for us. I did everything for. The doors slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed like the end of a nightmare. I collapsed into my chair, sobbing as Jonah ran into my arms. My attorney placed a gentle hand on my back. It's over, he whispered. You're free. But he was wrong. This was only the beginning. The courtroom emptied slowly, like everyone was afraid to move too quickly, afraid the fragile spell of truth might shatter if they breathed too loudly. I held Jonah against me, his small hands gripping the back of my blouse like he was afraid I'd slip away again. I whispered into his hair, telling him I loved him, that I was here, that I wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in months, I actually believed the words coming out of my own mouth. My attorney, Mr. Calloway, shuffled papers with trembling hands. Even he seemed shaken. "I'll file motions immediately," he muttered. "Your charges will be dismissed within hours. They'll have no grounds to hold a single claim against you now." I nodded numbly. It felt surreal, like I was floating out of my own body, watching the moment play out from somewhere above. Months of fear and accusations, sleepless nights, and the constant weight of not being believed, all of it was finally lifting, yet I couldn't process any of it. "Mom," Jonah whispered, "are you okay?" I cupped his face and managed a smile. "Because of you? Yes, I'm okay." He leaned into me, and I hugged him again. But as we walked out of the courtroom, the exhaustion hit me like a wave. My legs felt like wet sand. I hadn't slept a solid night in months. I hadn't eaten properly in days. My muscles shook with each step. Outside, reporters were already gathering. Someone must have tipped them off about Adrian's arrest. Microphones shot toward us, cameras flashed, voices piled on top of each other like a swarm of bees. "Mrs. Collins, is it true your husband framed you? Do you have a statement about the stolen data? What role did your son play in revealing the truth? Is Meridian Tech involved in a larger conspiracy?" Calloway raised his arms, shielding us. "No statements," he barked. "My client and her son are leaving. Step back." Security helped push the crowd away long enough for us to reach his car. He opened the back door for Jonah and then guided me into the passenger seat. As we pulled away, the courthouse shrinking in the rearview mirror, an eerie silence settled inside the car. Jonah looked out the window, chewing on his lip. "You're sure I did the right thing?" he asked suddenly. My heart sank at the pain in his voice. I twisted to face him. "You saved me," I said. "You saved us. You did the bravest, hardest thing anyone could have done." "But he's still my dad," Jonah whispered. "Shouldn't I have, I don't know, talked to him first?" Tears pricked my eyes again. "Sweetheart, your father made choices that hurt all of us. You didn't cause any of this. You didn't put him in handcuffs. He did." Jonah nodded, but his shoulders remained tight, like someone had tied invisible ropes around him. Calloway cleared his throat. "I've seen hundreds of cases like this," he said gently. "Not one child has ever done what you did today, Jonah. You should be proud." Jonah didn't respond, but he leaned back and stared out the window again. I could only hope he understood, truly understood, how powerful his courage had been. When we reached home, everything felt foreign. Quiet. Too quiet. The front door didn't screech the way it normally did. The living room felt hollow. Adrian's shoes weren't by the door. His mug wasn't on the counter. His jacket wasn't on the hook. It felt like someone had scooped out half the house and left the shell behind. Jonah hesitated in the doorway. "It feels weird," he muttered. I agreed, though I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I forced myself to breathe deeply. "Let's get inside. We'll order takeout. Today has been long." We stepped into the house cautiously, as though it might collapse under the weight of everything that had just happened. I set down my purse and immediately noticed the photo frames on the hallway wall. Our family portrait. Jonah's school picture. Our 10th anniversary photo. Adrian's smile in every single one of them felt like a lie now, like a mask that had fooled us both for years. Jonah walked ahead, paused halfway down the hall, and quietly lifted a frame off the wall. It was a picture of Adrian holding him at the beach when Jonah was 5. They were both smiling, water splashing around their feet. He stared at it for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. Was he ever who I thought he was? I stepped forward and rested a hand on his shoulder. "Yes," I said softly.
He was.
"I knew him before I knew you. There were years when he was kind, gentle, loving.
I won't lie to you about that."
But something changed, sweetheart. Something in him broke." Jonah nodded slowly, but he put the picture face down on the console table. I don't want to see him smiling right now, he whispered. We spent the evening curled up together on the couch, a pizza box open on the coffee table. The TV murmured in the background, though none of us really watched it. Jonah eventually fell asleep with his head on my lap, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. I brushed his hair gently, trying to memorize the peace on his face. For the first time in months, I wasn't terrified he'd be taken from me. But as the house darkened and the weight of the day settled in my bones, a new kind of fear began to bloom. What if this wasn't over? What if there were pieces of the story I still didn't know? And darker still, what if Adrian hadn't acted alone? The thought gnawed at me, refusing to let go. Meridian Tech wasn't known for being sloppy. They were known for burying secrets. If Adrian was just one piece in a larger game, then exposing him might have only cracked open the surface. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe everything had ended in that courtroom. But the unease in my chest wouldn't fade. The next morning, I woke to the sound of someone knocking on the door. My breath caught. I gently lifted Jonah's head off my lap and tucked a blanket around him before heading to the door. When I opened it, Calloway stood there, his tie crooked, his hair disheveled like he hadn't slept. "Good morning," he said with a grimace. "Or whatever this is." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" He stepped inside and shut the door quickly behind him. "You need to sit," he said. I obeyed, heart racing. "Your charges are being dropped," he began. "Completely. That part is officially done." Relief washed over me, briefly. But, he continued, something else happened overnight. My muscles tensed. "What?" Calloway ran a shaky hand through his hair. "Meridian Tech filed a motion at 3 a.m. About what?" I whispered. "They're refusing to acknowledge the evidence your son brought in." My breath froze. "What do you mean?" "They're claiming the video is fabricated. They're claiming the files are false. They're claiming your husband wasn't acting on their behalf and that the breach is still attributed to you." My stomach churned. "But that's insane," I said. "The video, the documents, the proof is right there." "It should have ended everything," he agreed. "But Meridian isn't backing down. They're behaving like a cornered animal, and cornered animals are dangerous." I rubbed my hands over my face. "Why would they do that?" "Because," he said slowly, "your husband wasn't lying when he said the company wanted a scapegoat." The room seemed to tilt. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Are you telling me," I whispered, "that Meridian Tech actually asked Adrian to frame me?" Calloway didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I leaned back in my chair, nausea rising at my throat. I had been wrong. This wasn't over. Not even close. Calloway continued, "The judge won't ignore the evidence. But the company has resources, lawyers, money, influence. They're going to fight. Hard. They have every reason to bury this." "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why me? Why us? Why any of this?" "Because," he said gently, "someone inside Meridian stole something far bigger than what you were accused of. And they need a clean way to point the blame somewhere else." I stared at him, trembling. What did Adrian get himself into? I whispered. Calloway sighed heavily. "That's the part I'm afraid of," he said, sitting across from me. "We all saw what your husband did. But Meridian's reaction tells me they're hiding more, and they're desperate to keep it buried." Jonah stirred in the living room, half asleep. Calloway lowered his voice. Whatever Adrian was involved in, he wasn't working alone. The air thickened. A cold shiver ran through me. If Adrian hadn't acted alone, there was someone else out there. Someone with money, power, connections. Someone who might not be happy that their plan had collapsed. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What happens now?" I whispered. Calloway clasped his hands. "Now," he said quietly, "we prepare for fallout." For the next 2 days, I barely slept. Jonah and I existed in a strange, fragile rhythm, moving quietly around the house like any loud sound might trigger the next catastrophe. The weight of uncertainty hung over us like fog. Every time a car drove past, I flinched. Every notification on my phone made my pulse spike. I kept imagining someone from Meridian showing up at our door, demanding explanations I didn't have. Jonah noticed my anxiety. Kids always notice. They're experts at reading the air adults pretend isn't heavy. "Mom," he said as he sat beside me on the couch, "are we safe?" I wrapped an arm around him and pulled him close. "Yes," I said softly. "We're safe." But the truth was, I didn't know. I wanted to believe the danger left with Adrian, that his arrest was the end of everything. But Meridian's sudden hostility, its refusal to acknowledge the truth, made it impossible to relax. They weren't just a company. They were a giant. And giants don't like being exposed. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I froze. Jonah's head jerked up. "Mom." The doorbell rang again, louder this time. I stood slowly, my heart pounding. "Stay here," I whispered. I walked to the door, each step measured, my mind racing through possibilities. A reporter? The police? Calloway? Meridian? When I opened the door, I expected the worst. What I saw was unexpected. A woman in her mid-40s stood there, her dark hair pulled into a low bun, her charcoal gray blazer pressed to perfection. She carried a slim leather folder and wore an expression that revealed nothing. "Mrs. Collins," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm, like someone who never feared being questioned. "Yes?" I asked cautiously. She extended a card. "My name is Serena Vale. I'm the Senior Legal Director for Meridian Tech." My stomach twisted into a knot. "What do you want?" I asked, my grip on the door tightening. She offered a polite, practiced smile. "May I come in? I'd rather speak inside. This conversation is sensitive." "No," I said immediately. "Say what you need to say right here." A brief flicker crossed her eyes, not annoyance, exactly, but acknowledgement. Like she expected the refusal.
"Very well," she said.
"I'll be direct." She opened her folder, revealing a set of documents neatly clipped together. "Meridian Tech wishes to resolve all conflict with you quickly and privately," she said. "We are prepared to offer a settlement that ensures your charges are not refiled, your record remains clear, and your custody of your son is unchallenged." I frowned. "What kind of settlement?" She tapped the papers. "A non-disclosure agreement. You sign it, we compensate you generously, and you agree never to speak publicly or legally about anything involving Meridian Tech, your husband's involvement, or Project Frostfire." My breath hitched. "You're asking me to stay silent about being framed?" I whispered. Serena maintained her composed expression. "We're offering you peace, Mrs. Collins. And safety." The way she said safety made a chill crawl up my spine. I crossed my arms. "What if I don't sign?" Her smile didn't change, but something sharp gleamed behind her eyes. "Then," she said, "Meridian will use every legal avenue available to them to ensure their interests remain protected. That includes revisiting all evidence, regardless of the new materials introduced in court." I stared at her, stunned. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," she replied smoothly. "I'm explaining your options." My hands trembled as I gripped the doorframe. "Get off my property." Serena held my gaze for a long moment, not hostile, not emotional, just measuring. Then she closed her folder with quiet finality. "Think about it," she said gently. "The world is not kind to single mothers with complicated histories. Doors close. Opportunities shrink. Your son deserves stability. Signing this will give him that. Fighting us will not." She handed me her card. "Call me when you're ready to make the smart choice." Then she walked down the driveway, stepping into a sleek black car that had been idling across the street. It pulled away smoothly, leaving a trail of dread behind it. When I closed the door, Jonah was standing at the end of the hall. "Mom," he whispered. "Who was that?" I forced my hands to stop shaking before I reached for him. "No one important." I lied. "Come on, let's get dinner started." But my mind churned. They weren't just trying to cover something up. They were desperate. And desperate people, desperate corporations, were dangerous. That night, after putting Jonah to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the business card Serena had given me. The embossed silver lettering felt like it mocked me. "The smart choice," she had said. The smart choice for whom? Certainly not for me. I was lost in thought when my phone buzzed. A message from Calloway. We need to meet first thing in the morning. Something new came up. My pulse quickened. What happened? I typed back. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, not over text. See you tomorrow. My mind spiraled with questions the rest of the night. I barely slept. Jonah could tell. He woke twice from nightmares of Adrian shouting, and each time I held him close, whispering that he was safe, even though I wasn't sure we were. The next morning, I left Jonah with my sister and drove to Calloway's office. Rain slashed against the windshield, blurring the city into a smear of gray. When I stepped inside his office, Calloway looked exhausted. Papers were spread across his desk, a half-eaten sandwich untouched beside them. What's going on? I asked. He gestured for me to sit. Something happened overnight, he said. Meridian filed an emergency injunction. They're claiming that your son illegally obtained proprietary information and that the video is fabricated. I stared at him, speechless. They're going after Jonah? I whispered. They're trying, he corrected. But a judge isn't likely to authorize anything against a minor without solid proof. Still, it shows how far they're willing to go. Rage simmered in my chest. They framed me, I said. Now they're trying to accuse my son of being a criminal? Calloway rubbed his temples. That's not the worst part. I froze. There's worse? He turned his computer monitor toward me. On the screen was a headline from an online news outlet. Meridian data breach expands. Company claims evidence of internal mole. Below it was a blurry image. A security still. Me. Walking into the Meridian building 2 months ago with coffee in hand, the morning I dropped lunch off for Adrian. My throat tightened. I wasn't even inside the restricted areas, I said. I just went to the lobby. Calloway nodded grimly. They're twisting everything they can. They're painting you as the insider. They're positioning themselves as victims. I stared at the screen, fury rising. All I had ever done was love my family, support my husband, raise my son, and now I was the villain in their story. Calloway leaned forward. They want you scared. They want you overwhelmed. They want you silent. I clenched my fists. So what do we do? He hesitated. We fight, he said finally, but it won't be easy. They have resources, power, influence. You have truth, but truth doesn't always win unless we push. I swallowed hard. Then we push. Relief flickered across his face, just for a moment. There's something else, he said, lowering his voice. I did some digging into Project Frostfire. I leaned forward. What is it? Calloway exhaled slowly. It's not just stolen data. Frostfire was part of a classified government contract. Meridian was supposed to test a new encryption model, military grade. But someone inside the company siphoned fragments of that model. Enough to sell on the black market. My skin prickled with cold. Are you saying Adrian leaked government technology? We don't know that yet. But someone did. And Meridian is terrified the government will find out. They need someone to pin this on. Someone small. Someone powerless. Someone like me. My stomach turned. Calloway, if this is bigger than we thought, then Jonah and I. He understood instantly. Yes, he said quietly. You could be in danger. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Tell me what to do, I whispered. You need protection, he said. You need distance. And we need to find out who inside Meridian was part of this. Adrian didn't do this alone. A heavy silence settled between us. What if, I said slowly, what if Adrian never intended to take the fall at all? What if the plan was always to use me as the scapegoat? What if that's why he changed? Why he got distant? Why he panicked when Jonah found the USB? Calloway nodded grimly. It fits. And what if, I added, voice trembling, the person he was working with is still out there? Calloway didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Someone was still pulling strings. Someone bigger. Someone smarter. Someone dangerous. And we were in the crosshairs. I left Calloway's office with the weight of 1,000 alarms screaming through my nerves. The sky outside had darkened further, heavy clouds bruising the horizon. It felt like the world itself was warning me, telling me danger was much closer than I wanted to admit. As I drove to my sister's house to pick up Jonah, I kept checking the rearview mirror. The same black sedan seemed to appear behind me again and again. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe the walls around my life were closing in faster than I could run. When I arrived, Jonah was sitting on the living room floor building a tower of wooden blocks with my nephew. He looked peaceful, safe, suspended in a childhood moment I desperately wished I could freeze. But the second he saw me, he jumped up, sensing something in my face. "Mom? What happened? Are you okay?" "Let's go home," I said gently. "We need to talk." At home, Jonah slumped onto the sofa and waited. I sat next to him, took a deep breath, and chose my words carefully. "Jonah, there are people who don't want the truth about Dad to come out. They're scared, and they're trying to fight back. It's not your fault, and it's not my fault. But it means we need to be careful for a little while." His face tightened. "Are they trying to hurt us?" The question sliced through me. "No," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "But they might try to scare us. Or confuse things. Or make us doubt ourselves. We just have to stick together and be strong. Can you do that with me?" He nodded, though uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. That night, after Jonah went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen with Calloway's words echoing through my mind.
Someone else is involved.
Someone bigger. Someone who had access to government-level encryption. Someone who had manipulated my husband. Someone who desperately needed a scapegoat. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have taken the deal." Cold spread across my chest. My fingers shook as I tried to respond, but another message came instantly. "Silence would have kept you safe." My heart hammered against my ribs. I blocked the number immediately, but the dread stayed. I checked the locks on every door.
Twice.
Then I went to Jonah's room, smoothing his blanket and brushing hair from his forehead. I needed to be strong, for both of us, but the fear curled inside me like a serpent. Hours passed before exhaustion finally dragged me into a restless sleep. The next morning dawned strangely quiet. No cars passing outside. No distant lawnmowers. Even the birds seemed muted. Jonah sat at the table eating cereal, swinging his legs gently under the chair. "Mom," he said through a mouthful of milk. "You're watching the window again." I blinked. He was right, I kept glancing at the street. "Sorry," I said with a strained smile. "Just thinking." He swallowed and wiped his mouth. "Want me to turn on cartoons? You never look stressed when cartoons are on." I couldn't help but laugh softly.
"Sure."
As he flipped through channels, I checked my email. There was a message from Calloway marked urgent. "Need you in the office ASAP. Major development." No explanation.
Just that single line.
I exhaled slowly. "Jonah, get your shoes on. We need to go." He obeyed quickly, grabbing his backpack like it held something valuable. Maybe it did. Maybe he felt the same danger I did. The drive was tense. Every passing car felt suspicious. Every shadow too heavy. When we arrived at Calloway's office, he opened the door before we even knocked. "You both came?" he asked, surprised. "I wasn't leaving him alone," I said firmly. He nodded. "Good. You'll want him here for this." We followed him inside. Calloway locked the door behind us and closed the blinds. "Okay," he said, rubbing his hands together anxiously. "Listen carefully. Something happened this morning." "What is it?" I asked. He took a breath. "Adrian escaped custody." My stomach dropped. "What?" I whispered. "He was being transported to a federal detainment facility. The vehicle was ambushed. Guards knocked unconscious. Adrian is gone." I felt the room tilt. Jonah's voice trembled. "Dad escaped." Calloway's eyes softened, but his voice was grave. This wasn't a random escape. This was orchestrated by people with resources. Someone doesn't want Adrian talking. Someone doesn't want him in custody where he could expose the truth. My pulse thundered. "You think Meridian was behind it?" "Not officially," Calloway said. but someone connected to Frostfire definitely was. I sank into a chair, numb. Adrian was out. The company still refused to back down. And the person behind everything, the real architect, remained hidden. Is he coming here? Jonah whispered. I reached for him instinctively, humming with terror.
No.
No, sweetheart. He won't. But I didn't believe my own words. Listen, Calloway said urgently. There's more. After the escape, federal agents raided Adrian's safe house. My head shot up. His what? He had a safe house, Calloway repeated, stocked with money, passports, and a laptop. They cracked into it, and what they found changes everything. He handed me a printed document, the first page of dozens. What is this? I asked. Emails, Calloway said, between Adrian and someone else. A person listed only as S. They'd been communicating for over a year. A year? I echoed. He'd been planning this for a year? Yes, Calloway said softly. Long before he changed. Long before he got distant. Long before the fraud. This wasn't something he fell into. This was intentional. Calculated. I stared at the pages in disbelief. Look at the signature, Calloway urged. I scanned the bottom of the message. My breath caught. SV. Serena Vale. The woman who stood on my doorstep offering safety in exchange for silence.
Jonah leaned in.
That's the lady who came to our house. I felt my skin crawl. Calloway continued. There's more. Some messages talk about you, about what information of yours she needed Adrian to obtain. Some talk about Frostfire. Some mention payments. And one message from Serena to Adrian says, and I quote, make sure she looks like the only logical suspect. Once she's charged, the rest falls into place. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. They were using you, Calloway said. They used your name, your identity, your life, to hide a crime the company was involved in. Adrian didn't just frame you. He partnered with the woman running Meridian's legal division. Jonah squeezed my hand. Mom, he whispered, they're bad people. I nodded, my heart breaking. So what now? I whispered. Calloway's eyes were heavy. Now we take this to the federal level. And you need to leave your house. I blinked. Leave?
Why?
Because Adrian is desperate, Calloway said. Serena is cornered. And if they work together once, they might again. You and Jonah need somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. Jonah gripped my arm. I don't want to go without you. You won't, I promised, tightening my hold on him. Calloway nodded. There's a safe location the agency can place you in until this is resolved. I didn't want to disappear. I didn't want to uproot my son again. But one look at his frightened eyes told me there was no choice.
We'll go, I said.
Suddenly the office lights flickered. Then went dark. Jonah gasped. Calloway froze. My heart shot into my throat. Stay here, Calloway whispered, reaching toward the emergency flashlight he kept in his desk. But before he could turn it on, a shadow passed by the frosted glass of the office door. A silhouette. Then another. Jonah pressed against me. Mom. My breath trembled out of me as footsteps echoed outside the office.
Slow.
Heavy. Intentional. Then a knock on the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Calloway glanced toward his desk drawer where he kept a small protective weapon. But before he could reach it, another sound cut through the hallway. A familiar voice. Too familiar. Maya. The voice said softly. Adrian. My blood turned to ice. I think we need to talk. The sound of Adrian's voice, soft, calm, almost coaxing, turned my spine to stone. It didn't belong here, not in this small, dim office, not after everything he'd done. Jonah clutched my arm so tightly my skin burned where his fingers dug in. Calloway froze in place, the emergency flashlight in one hand, the other hovering near the desk drawer. The office was drenched in darkness except for thin strips of gray light leaking in from behind the blinds. Every shadow felt alive. Maya. Adrian's voice called through the door again. Please open up. We need to talk. My breath trembled out of me. No, I whispered. Calloway leaned toward us and murmured, "Do not move. Do not speak." Jonah buried his face into my side. Another silhouette shifted past the frosted glass. I recognized the way it moved, controlled, elegant, precise. Serena Vale. My lungs seized. She was here. My hand instinctively moved to Jonah's back, keeping him close, as if that alone could shield him from the monsters on the other side of the door. "Open the door, Maya," Adrian said again, this time the softness melting into something brittle. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to explain." Explain? Explain how he let strangers rip our lives apart? Explain how he allowed them to use my identity like a puppet? Explain how he stood there, stone-faced, while I was arrested? Explain how he said I was dragging him down? Explain how he tried to take my son? Calloway's voice dropped to the faintest whisper. "They don't know we've alerted authorities. Agents are already en route. We just need to stay quiet." A cold laugh drifted through the door. "You don't have to hide," Serena said. "We're not your enemies, Mrs. Collins. We're problem solvers." Problem solvers. The words tasted poisonous. Calloway stood slowly, silently signaling me to keep Jonah low and behind the desk. I obeyed, pulling Jonah down with me, positioning our bodies behind the solid oak. Adrian's voice grew sharper. "Maya, if you just let me talk." "Stop," Serena snapped under her breath, barely audible through the door, but clear enough.
"Don't beg."
"She won't respond to guilt." "Logic, Adrian. Use logic." Logic? There was nothing logical about what they had done. Calloway pulled out the small secured weapon he kept. He handled it with steady hands, trained and confident. "If they force entry, stay down. Do not run. Do not scream. Wait for my signal." Jonah's fingers trembled against my palm. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely a breath, "why is Dad doing this?" Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Because I didn't have an answer. I only squeezed his hand. "We're okay," I whispered. "We're okay." A sudden metallic clink sounded from the door handle. Calloway stiffened. "They're trying the lock." Then,
A slow creak.
they weren't breaking down the door. They were picking the lock. Professional. Silent.
Precise.
Serena's voice drifted through the crack. "You don't have to be afraid of us, Mrs. Collins. We just need the laptop. The one from the safe house." Calloway's eyes darted to the shelf behind him. The laptop. Adrian's laptop. The one federal agents had seized digitally, but not physically. The one that still contained raw data, emails, plans, communication logs. The last piece of proof. The last thing tying Adrian and Serena to Frostfire. No wonder they were here. Adrian's voice cracked next. "Maya, I didn't want it to go this far.
I didn't want you involved.
But you forced us into a corner. You ran to the FBI. You." A sharp intake of breath followed. Serena whispered, "Stop talking."
He didn't.
"You don't understand," Adrian hissed. "Everything I did to protect us. They promised." "Enough." Serena's tone sliced the air. "Do not say another word." Calloway mouthed to me, "Stall them." He wanted me to distract them. I swallowed hard and rose slowly from behind the desk, placing myself between them and Jonah. My legs felt like they were made of wet clay. I took a slow step toward the door. Close enough they would hear me clearly, far enough to keep Jonah out of their sight. "What do you want?" I called, my voice echoing slightly in the darkness. Movement stopped on the other side. Then Serena's voice sharpened with satisfaction. "There she is." Adrian exhaled shakily. "Maya, please open the door." "No," I said. "Tell me why you're here." A hiss of impatience from Serena.
"Fine."
"You want the truth? You, your husband, and I were all caught in the middle of something far bigger than any of us." I clenched my fists. I wasn't caught in anything. I was dragged. "You were necessary," Serena answered coolly. "We needed a clean identity, a stable one. Someone without financial irregularities, someone who would look guilty in the right light but wouldn't immediately spark suspicion within the company. You were ideal." Ideal. They had chosen me like choosing a knife from a drawer. Adrian's voice broke again, trembling. I thought if you took the fall, I'd protect you from the worst of it. Serena promised I could negotiate a deal. Serena scoffed. Feelings aside, you were compensated generously. Adrian's silence confirmed it. My stomach lurched. How much? I demanded, a shaky fury taking root. How much did you trade my life for? He didn't answer. Serena did. $250,000. I gasped. Jonah stiffened behind the desk. That's all. I whispered, horrified. Our marriage? Your son? My freedom? You sold everything for that. No, Maya, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Serena cut in. And now he is nothing because he failed.
You were supposed to stay quiet.
You were supposed to crumble under pressure. Instead you fought back, and your son found the evidence. Jonah's grip tightened. You should be proud of him, Serena continued casually. He's smarter than his father. Adrian snapped. Serena? What? She replied. It's true. Their dynamic cracked open in front of me. Adrian wasn't her partner.
He was her pawn.
He was expendable.
Just like they wanted me to be.
I don't have the laptop, I said, forcing my voice steady. The FBI does. A moment of silence. Then Serena's tone sharpened with knowing. That's a lie. A cold pulse shot through me. You retrieved the laptop from Adrian's safe house before the agents got there, she continued. We know the timeline. We know you have it. And we know you haven't turned it fully over. Calloway stiffened behind me. How would you know that? I asked. Serena's answer chilled me to the bone. Because we've been monitoring your movements. A tremor racked my body. Then she said something even worse. And your son's. My breath stopped. Jonah let out a tiny, terrified gasp. Adrian muttered something frantic under his breath. Guilt or panic or fear. I couldn't tell. Calloway stepped forward, silent but ready. The lock clicked fully. Serena had picked it. The handle began to turn. And then, a thunderous voice roared down the hallway. Federal agents. Step away from the door. Heavy boots pounded the floor. The office filled with flashing lights. The door burst inward, knocking Serena back as armed agents flooded the room. In the chaos, I grabbed Jonah and pulled him tightly into my arms. Adrian froze, his hands half raised, panic twisting his features into something unrecognizable. Serena, ever composed even as agents surrounded her, raised her hands slowly but glared straight at me with a venomous calm. This isn't over, she said softly. Then she smiled. A cold, terrible smile. And let them take her. Adrian was dragged out next, shouting over his shoulder. Maya, you don't understand. I did it for us. I did everything for her. The door slammed shut behind him. His voice vanished. It was over. Finally, it was over. The weeks that followed were slow, strange, and heavy. Jonah and I were placed under temporary federal protection while the investigation exploded across national headlines. Meridian Tech collapsed under scrutiny. Serena's emails, deals, and corruption were exposed. Adrian was charged with conspiracy, obstruction, fraud, and more crimes than I could count. One night, after Jonah fell asleep, an agent handed me a sealed letter Adrian had written from his holding cell. I hesitated for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sentence. I don't know when I stopped being the man you loved. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because the man who wrote that wasn't the man I married. Not anymore. Jonah healed slowly. He had nightmares for months, of shadows behind doors, of whispers outside windows, of his father calling his name. But he also grew stronger, braver, more resilient than I could ever have imagined. I healed too, painfully, quietly, one piece at a time. But we healed together. People often say rebuilding your life after destruction is like planting flowers in ashes. They're wrong. It's more like waking up from a long, terrible dream and realizing the world hasn't ended after all. There's daylight again, and breath, and hope, and the knowledge that no matter how close the darkness comes, we survived. We're still here, And we are finally free. After everything that happened, after all the fear and the chaos and the nights I thought I'd never get back up again, life finally feels quiet. Not empty, just peaceful. Jonah's asleep inside right now, curled up with the blanket he's had since he was 5. And for the first time in a long time, I'm sitting out here on the porch without checking every shadow or jumping at every sound. Maybe that's why I'm finally able to talk to you like this. You know, sharing this story wasn't easy. Reliving it wasn't easy. But I did it because someone out there needed to hear it. Maybe you needed to hear it. Maybe you needed to know that people can survive things they never thought they could. That even when the world feels like it's crushing you, there's always a piece of strength left inside you that hasn't broken yet. If you made it this far with me, thank you. Truly. It means more than you know. And if my story spoke to you, if it made you feel something, if it kept you on the edge, if it helped you forget your own worries for just a moment, then I hope you'll stay with me for the next one too. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, but so you don't miss the stories that might be the reminder you need on a hard day. Stories of survival, betrayal, hope, mystery, stories that prove life can break you and still be rebuilt stronger than before. Your support helps these stories live. Your listening made this one matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. And thank you, truly, for letting me share my voice with you. Take care of yourself. Hold on to your strength. And I'll see you in the next story.